aired this one tonight, so if you know of anybody who missed it, we will be able to get that to them at a later date. So I think we should start going over the mise en place that we sent everybody, and just make sure that we've got all our ingredients in place, and maybe kind of talk about those ingredients just a little bit. Tracey, do you want to start that?
Sure. So first off, I have a pot of boiling water going and some salt. And then we have Leah's amazing spaghetti. She does a fresh extruded spaghetti. For this class, we'll be using 1 pound. This should serve about 4 people. And I have about 4 ounces of guanciale. If you don't have guanciale, you can easily substitute pancetta. Leah and I are both fans of the funk of guanciale. It's cured pork jowls, if you haven't had it before. It has a nice bite to it, and it's nice and porky and adds the right amount of fat to make this dish really rich and delicious. And then we have black peppercorns. For this dish, we like to use this Malaysian peppercorn, so it's called Sarawak. What's different from regular black peppercorns is that it is a little bit less spicy, and so you can, and it's fragrant, so you can add a little bit more of and get more of the peppery flavor without adding too much heat. And then we also have our pecorino. I have some grated already, so that I can just quickly add it at the end. And I have a block because I like to finish my pasta with fresh grated cheese on top, because it looks really pretty. And then we have our eggs. I've separated mine ahead of time just so that everything will be ready as we need it. Yeah. Is that it, Leah? I think so.
I think that covers everything. I think and you mentioned the difference between pancetta and guanciale, and I think, well, it's really hard to find. If you are able to get your hands on guanciale, it does offer a really distinctive, somewhat gamier quality, and it has a lot more fat and a different texture of fat than pancetta does. So if you were able to get your hands on it, whether it was picking up a kit at the shop or somewhere else, the guanciale, Susan, guanciale locally out by you in Agora, I have no idea, but you can always pick some up from me in Pasadena. So so yes, that's the guanciale. All right, so Tracey, what's our first step?
So the first thing you want to do is salt your pasta water. If you attended the last class, you know how important it is. If your water is not, so the point of seasoning your pasta water is to season the pasta itself. So it's kind of like seasoning a steak. So if you don't salt your pasta water, there's not really any fixing it once the pasta goes into the sauce. So because we're using fresh spaghetti, it's in nice little nests that Leah and her team has prepared, but it doesn't really take up that much space in the water. If you were going to use a long pasta, dry pasta, you would need more water to make sure it's all submerged. But because I have these nice little nests that I'm going to unravel, and because they're not going to be a stick when I drop it in, I just have 2 quarts of water. I'm using kosher salt. Every restaurant that I've ever worked in, the preferred salt is this diamond crystal salt. The size of the salt and the flavor is what I'm used to, and so I know how to control the seasoning. So I've added 5 tablespoons of that salt to 2 quarts of water. So you can kind of use that ratio with the amount of water that you have. So if you're using, what's that?
I was just gonna say, I think you were about to say the same thing that I was.
Yeah, if you're using iodized salt, that's gonna be a little bit different. I would start with less, maybe even 3 tablespoons, and then keep tasting it as you add more and more. Just start with a little bit. You want your water to be pretty salty. You don't want it to be, you want it past the point where it's delicious, because it's gonna take on that salt in the cooking process. So it's going to be a little bit saltier than delicious.
I think I would add also if your kosher salt is the Morton's brand of kosher salt, it is also a higher level of salinity per granule, and so you may want to use a little bit less as well. But really, the best way to know if you've properly seasoned your pasta water is to taste it.
So Leah, how much did you end up putting for your?
Well, I have a really large pot going, and so I would say I've probably done 6 or 7 tablespoons at this point for the pot water I have, and I have about 6 quarts of water in this pot.
There's a question about Susan has heard that they want pasta water should be salty like the ocean. I've definitely gone by this saying before, but the last time I went to the beach, I kind of like got a mouthful of salt water. And the first thing I said out loud was that this water is way saltier than my pasta water. So I wouldn't go that salty. The ocean is a little bit, I think you've gone too far. So you might want to add a little bit more water if it tastes like the ocean.
Okay, and then my bud here just told me that somebody asked if you could oversalt your water, and yes, you can. You know, it will make your pasta extra salty. You know, when you're thinking of these really large pots of salted water, you're imagining that there's going to be an amount of uptake, but it's not all going to be absorbed by your pasta. But if you do oversalt your water, then it will be salty. So your best bet is to start with less, and you can always add more. But you definitely want to add less. Okay, so camera person over here. I think, Enzo, did you tell me that somebody had asked a question about a link to the recipe? So there is no link for the recipe. It would have been in the email that you had gotten. There would have been an ingredient list and a prep list. And right now the recipe is the thing we're about to teach. And we also posted those things, both the ingredient list with the quantities in the chat as well. I wonder if I can pin that to the top. Let's see. No, I can't, but I can copy it and I can repaste it. So I'm going to do that again in case anybody missed it. Okay. All right. So you want your water to be coming up to a boil. This is the kind of dish that comes together really quickly. So Tracey, what should we be doing with our big saute pan right now?
Okay, so first I think you can turn your pan on low just to start it getting warm. I have it on about a 2 of, I don't even know what this goes up to, of 6, just to get it warm. And while that's happening, we are going to crush our Sarawak pepper. If you have a pepper grinder, that works. We in the restaurant like to hand crush it with a pan. The reason that we do this is so that you get more control over the size of the actual peppercorns, the ground size. So I took about an ounce. The amount that you use is totally going to be up to you and how spicy and peppery you like it. I like things pretty peppery. Cacio pepe is my favorite of the Roman pastas, and that is just pepper and cheese. But I'm going to hand crush this. If you have a grinder again, that will work. Yeah, I think, but okay, so we're gonna do it with a pan. I have a little saute pan, and I'm right-handed, so I take the pan with my left hand, and I'm gonna apply pressure with my right hand. I'm gonna apply pressure into this bottom corner of the pan, I guess it's not a corner, but that is going to apply pressure onto the little peppercorns. They're going to start to roll around, so you just have to kind of keep them in place. But I'm basically going to try to crack at least every single one in half. I like to get pretty big sizes because I want a punch. If you want it to be a little bit less peppery, you can do it smaller. All right, so I'm just going to show you this demonstration. And then once you get a few crushed, just kind of move it around so that the little balls sit in place on top of the other ground pieces.
I love watching that.
Once you start crushing it, you can really start smelling how fragrant these peppercorns are. It's really nice. Starting to lose a few of them here.
They are also like ball bearings under your feet if they roll onto the floor.
Got 2 down there so far.
Awesome. I love that it's such a simple thing. I think we get really, I am definitely somebody who's gotten obsessed with kitchen tools, you know, time and time again, but it's really just one of those like lovely things that you can do a dish like this with so few fancy tools. You just need the bottom of your pan to get your peppercorns ground, you know, boiling water. I was really amazed when I went and I did my stages in Italy, and I was at people's houses that, you know, their pots were much smaller than I had imagined they would be in a place that cooked a lot of pasta. So I think whatever you've got on hand, you can really get by.
Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of like popcorn. Once you get like to the end of it, you'll hear that there's no more peppercorns to crush. So I'm right about there. I have different sizes, but all of them are crushed at least in half. If you really don't want a bite of the full peppercorn, that's just a little, it's just going to be sit there and it's going to be spicy and you're just going to keep thinking about it the whole time you're eating the pasta. Okay, so now I think we have all of our ingredients prepped. I have my water that's salted. I can just show you. I have, it's a little bit dark here, but my guanciale is here. I have my pecorino, my eggs, and my pepper. And that's it. It's really simple. So now I'm going to go over to my stove here.
While you're working on that, Kelly has said 1 ounce seems like a lot of peppercorns. And Kelly, you are right, it is. You know, when you're making cacio e pepe, that is like the main ingredient in your dish. We are gonna I personally am gonna dial back the pepper in my carbonara tonight and my gricia. So if it seems like a lot, you can do a little less. We'll show you the variations once we get started here. Tracey's getting her pan all warm and ready.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have 1 ounce available, but we're definitely not going to use all of it. Yeah. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is get a little bit of oil in my pan. When I saute the guanciale, I use a little bit of any kind of neutral oil. So I have grapeseed here. Canola is fine. Anything neutral. And then I'm going to add my guanciale. But you can turn it up a little bit. What we're going to be doing is crisping it up.
So Tracey,
How are you doing over there?
I was looking at your guanciale, and they look like more like they're in like strips like lardon than cubes like mine.
Yeah, I like to do I figured cubes are generally easier. But when doing any kind of pasta, I like to mimic the shape of the pasta so that it kind of runs with it. So for this spaghetti, I like to do long strips because we're using a long spaghetti. But cubes work perfectly fine as well.
All right, so now everybody knows how to up their game. Yes.
Someone said that I didn't have a mild or pepper for the pasta that class and it was so maybe that was last first time.
Okay, yeah. So if for any reason you didn't pick up Sarawak peppercorns and you have a spicier peppercorn, like a cherry, you're definitely going to want to dial that back, especially if you're a little bit heat sensitive. So you know, you can always add a little bit more if you want it to have a bit more heat to it. But those Sarawak peppercorns were, in particular, or we chose for their kind of milder quality. So I think that's pink peppercorns. Tracey, do you have any thoughts on pink peppercorns?
I think black works well flavor-wise for this. I think pink is just a little bit too much of that. It's very fragrant. It has a particular flavor. I guess you could use it. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it necessarily would go well with this dish, but I mean, if you're cooking at home, you can make things however you want. So
yeah.
Right now, we just have oil and guanciale in the pan. If you add the peppercorn too early, you'll burn it, and you'll definitely taste the bitterness from it.
So, and then somebody, so Laura, if you're using cherry, I definitely would dial back the amount that you're going to use because it's going to be much spicier. Tracey, what are your thoughts about white? Somebody brought white Sarawak peppercorns. It's a very distinctive flavor. I'm not sure how to recommend using those.
I have never used white Sarawak peppercorns. In general, white peppercorns are super funky. They kind of smell and taste like, I like it for certain things, but not for this dish. Yeah, I think black goes the best with this.
So, and you know, I mean, ultimately, if you have what you have, you can try it out, and then you'll have to give us feedback on how those ingredients,
like
rainbow or white, and let us know.
So my guanciale is pretty much done. The outside has turned from like a translucent color to white, kind of opaque color everywhere, and it's starting to get a little bit crisp. So I'm going to remove the guanciale for now and set it aside. And depending on your whatever meat you're using, your guanciale or pancetta, you're gonna have probably a lot of extra fat. So if I have about a little over a quarter cup of fat, maybe even a third. So I'm gonna take out maybe half of that for now. I'm turning my heat down to low.
Okay. My the fat on my guanciale is just rendering out. Hey Tracey, you know, a couple of days ago, and I had reached out to some plant-based chefs to get an answer on this and didn't hear back. If you are either off pork, like you don't eat pork, or you're a vegetarian, are there any recommendations that you have that could kind of be a variation on carbonara without those ingredients?
Yeah, you can totally do. I mean, we did the cacio e pepe class last time. It's a great vegetarian dish. I'm not a vegetarian, but I eat that all the time. That's pretty much the same dish minus the egg and the guanciale. Yeah, and if you, I mean, you can add vegetables, you can, cooking at home, you should be able to do whatever you want. I know that these dishes are very traditional and there's a lot of rules and people have a lot of opinions about them, but when you're at home, nobody's gonna know. You can do whatever you want.
I had a couple of people that suggested that they might be using turkey bacon, and my suggestion to them was if that was something that they were going to do, they might want to add a little bit of butter at some point to the dish, just to add a little bit more unctuousness, since there is so little fat in turkey bacon.
Yeah, so for this recipe, I'm starting with about 2 tablespoons of the guanciale fat. But if you don't have that residual fat, you can definitely add a little bit of olive oil. I would recommend olive oil or grapeseed if that's what you have. So at this point, I'm gonna add the peppercorn. I'm gonna start with a tablespoon of the already crushed peppercorn. And I'm just gonna saute it in the guanciale fat to kind of bring out the flavor.
All right, I'm gonna do the same, but I'm gonna do a little bit less pepper since we've got the kiddos eating dinner tonight. And you've got your pan back around low, correct?
Yeah, you don't want to burn your Sarawak pepper, and that can happen very quickly. And then as a side note, I have some water that's unseasoned. It doesn't have to be super hot. You don't want it to be cold because it'll cool down your pasta, but I just have some regular unsalted water on the side. So we can add that to our sauce without adding additional salt if we need it.
And I'm gonna reiterate, Tracy, you poured off all but about 2 tablespoons of the fat, correct?
Yes, exactly.
So
okay, so I've been toasting my peppercorns. I can still smell them starting to get fragrant. So I am going to kill the cooking by adding water. I'm gonna add about 2 ounces of the pasta water. And then I'm gonna turn my heat down to low while we cook our pasta.
okay. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna kill the cooking on my pepper. All right.
Okay, so now I'm going to add my pasta to the water. Leah, what is the recommended cooking time for your spaghetti?
The recommended cooking time for the fresh pasta, if you're using my fresh pasta, is about 2 to 3 minutes. I generally err, for a dish like this, I would err on the side of cooking shorter because we're going to be finishing everything in the pan. And so I would really probably be ready to pull it out at the 2-minute mark. If you're using a dried pasta, my favorite actually is to do this with our rigatoni. And if I were doing it in that case, then I would probably cook it for about 5 to 6 minutes until it's just shy of al dente, still really firm to the bite, but not crunchy. I've been told by my assistant here that there's a question that I have not addressed. What's that question?
Do you add fat to the pepper sauce?
Do you add fat to the pepper saute? Oh, I've got some really strong pepper flavor there. So you should have had about 2 tablespoons of your guanciale fat left in your pan that you were using to then bloom or toast your peppercorns. All right, Tracey, did you drop your pasta already?
I did.
All right, I'm gonna drop mine right now. No, you can't. What? Kim, how's it going? Ooh, Pepper in the lungs. How's it going over there, Kim? Oh, let's see if I can unmute you. What? All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
All right. It smells amazing. I'm glad I took the first class. I can definitely, because I remember everything I learned in the first class. And therefore, I didn't have to use a hammer to crush the peppercorns. I was prepared. Yeah, no, it looks great. It smells great. The guanciale is my first time using it. Smells amazing. I did a little extra crisp on mine. My fans are coming on, and that's why I'm going to go back on mute because it's kind of loud.
All right.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes for mine. Because I'm using a small pot and the pasta killed the boil in my water, it might actually need another minute. So I think I ended up cooking mine for 3 minutes just because my water took a while to come back to a boil.
Mine is rolling away there. Nice camera work here.
Okay, so I am going to now add it to the fat and the pepper in the pan. I'm going to try to let it drain a little bit so I'm not adding all of the salted pasta water to my pan. When you're removing the pasta and putting in your pan, you don't want to drain off all of your pasta water because you might want to use that later to thicken your sauce. So if you do end up straining it, catch some of the pasta water so you can reserve it for later use. And then once it's in the pan, I'm going to turn the heat back up. And you just want to move it around so it doesn't stick to the bottom. And you want to mix all that fat and the peppercorn to incorporate it into the noodles.
All right, Gia, you want to test a piece of ours? Whoops. You grab a bite. I'm gonna take off a piece. That's about where I want it.
So my pan is getting a little bit dry. So I'm going to add water to it. I just tasted it and I don't really want to add any more salt to this. So I'm adding that water, the unsalted water to it. I added about 4 more ounces. And right now you're just kind of mixing it and in the sauce, cooking it in the sauce, and the noodles are going to take on that nice peppery guanciale flavor. I can see by looking at it that I'm going to want more peppercorn. So taste it. You can judge for yourself if you want it to be more peppery or not. I'm going to add another little sprinkle of peppercorn. Let's say that was about a tablespoon. And a couple more ladles, about 4 ounces of unsalted water.
Okay, so the first question is, did we add the reserved fat back into the pan? And the answer is no, we did not add that fat back into the pan. Just what's left in the pan from when we toasted those peppercorns. And then as far as, using a non-stick or a regular pan, I think it's a matter of preference. Tracey, do you have any feelings about that? I tend to use a stainless steel pan, but
yeah, in the restaurant we normally use a stainless steel pan. But at home, all I have is this one nonstick pan that I use for everything. So that's what I'm using.
There you go.
But it's not really gonna stick. It shouldn't stick. You want to keep your sauce pretty wet where it's not sticking. So it shouldn't be a problem to clean it off later. Okay, so I'm right about there with the cooking process. How is yours, Leah? Mine is pretty much cooked to where I want it. Oh my God, your spaghetti is so good. It has a nice bite to it. It's seasoned from the pasta water. And when I move around my noodles, I can still see sauce. Like we say that it's loose. It's a little bit saucy still. I'm gonna add two more ounces of water because we're gonna add cheese and egg, and it's gonna thicken the sauce back up.
What's the question, hon?
And really quick, I'm turning off my heat right now.
Tracey, have you put the guanciale back into the pan yet?
We're gonna get to that right now. So I've just turned off the heat. I'm adding the guanciale back. You can see that it stayed nice and crispy because it's not just sitting in that sauce. I'm gonna mix it around so that it gets entangled in the spaghetti. And I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil. I'm gonna add I'll add about half of the cheese. I'm gonna mix that in. And again, your heat is off already. If your heat is on, you're gonna clump up the cheese and it's just gonna be really clumpy. It's gonna cook it into little clumps. And then now I'm gonna add my eggs.
How do you keep the guanciale or your pancetta from just kind of sitting in a puddle around the sides of your pan like I have right now?
I would say when you sprinkle it in, try to sprinkle it everywhere. And I think that's kind of, you just gotta kind of move it around.
And then you want to add your cheese really slowly, right? So that it doesn't clump up.
Yeah, so I sprinkled the cheese in and then mixed it around. And then I added the egg yolks in, and your pan should be not cold, but definitely not hot enough to cook the eggs. And then I just mixed that around as well.
All right, so I'm slowly adding my cheese in. Have you added all 2 ounces of the cheese, Tracey?
I started with an ounce and I just tasted it. I'm gonna add a little bit more. So I'm just gonna sprinkle it everywhere so that it mixes in nicely. Actually, I'm adding the rest of it, yeah. And that's pretty much it. At this point, you want to taste it to see how much more cheese you want to add. That's a personal preference. And if you want more pepper, you can add more pepper.
All 2 ounces cheese has been added.
I already answered that, sweetheart.
I'm gonna add the
I like the flavor of olive oil, so I'm going to give it a little bit more olive oil and mix that in. And that's pretty much it.
So we are using all 4 of those egg yolks that we had you separate, right, Trace?
Yes, all 4 of them. And it will make your sauce nice and orangey yellow if you're using those beautiful chino eggs. This is what my finished product looks like. And you can see there's like a little bit of sauce just running through. But that's pretty much it.
All right. Enzo, so I'm noticing that mine is feeling a little tight, so I'm going to add some of that fresh water to the pan just to kind of loosen things up before I start adding my egg yolks, and you're gonna add those egg yolks. Again, you wanna make sure that your pot is not too hot because
Should be off at this point.
yeah, but even you should have had it off the heat for a fair amount of time by the time you add those egg yolks, right?
Yes, yes.
So I've got most of my cheese incorporated, and I'm gonna slowly add my yolks.
And the yolks, it's not necessary to whisk it beforehand. Once you start mixing it in the pasta, it'll break down just as easily. But you're gonna pour it just directly into your pasta. And yeah, like Leah said, it should be a little bit liquidy still because the eggs and the cheese are gonna thicken it up.
There we go.
So at this point, everything should be in there.
And oh, I think Kim's hard at work over here. I can't wait to see what hers looks like. I'm coming. So notice there's a lot of stirring going on over here, but look how beautiful and luscious that sauce is. Jake, can you get him really close? No scrambled eggs, just kind of almost, for lack of a better term, it's juicy. And I'm gonna add just a little bit more of the cheese that I left out before. I have some chunks that didn't grate fine, so you can see them kind of floating around in there. But that looks so gorgeous. Now, Kim, I've seen this, Tracey, I've seen this done with whole eggs as opposed to just the egg yolks.
Done that. How does that come out?
I think it comes out okay. I think it's a little less luxurious.
Yeah.
You're adding some of that egg white protein.
Yeah.
I think it makes it a little stiffer too.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
It's scrambled.
Yeah, and don't be afraid if it's feeling really tight and you can't really mix it around. Go ahead and add more of the water, just to loosen it up. If it tastes like it needs salt, that's when you would use the water that you cooked your pasta in, the salted water. Go light on that, because you can always add just regular salt if you're afraid of adjusting both the amount of sauce and the salt at the same time.
Yeah. And Angela, I'm sorry that you scrambled a little bit. It takes a lot of practice, and it probably was just your pan being a little too hot when you added those egg yolks. So, just remembering to make sure that you're off the heat when you add those egg yolks, and that your pot has had some time to cool down, will really help make sure that you don't scramble. But I have done it a ton of times and it still tastes good. It's just a little different texture. So if anybody has any more questions, throw those up in the chat. Otherwise, I think the next best thing is for everybody to grab their forks and plates and get ready for some dinner. Kim, how did it come out? Good, or you can't unmute still. Oh, why?
Zoom.
I didn't know I had to ask every time. There you go.
Yeah, no, it smells great and it looks great. Don't see if it tastes great.
Should we all get a fork at the same time here?
Yeah, I gotta go get my plates. I love to say guanciale. I'm gonna go back to Nashville and do that around my family.
Yeah.
See what their comeback is.
You know what?
You know, fat back. Growing up on the farm, we call it little fat back.
All right. I think you're gonna be my taste taster. Taste tester. Make it hot. Go on it. Susan, I'm glad yours came out good, and so I will grab you another fork and give you a taste. Want to come over here? So big thank you to my little helpers tonight and my husband, who's not so little helper. I'm gonna get you a little bit of guanciale on there. So buon appetito tutti. I hope everybody enjoys their dinner and everybody enjoyed the class. I think I'm gonna try and convince Kim and Tracey to reprise one more time, and we'll do amatriciana next, the last of the Roman dishes.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is basically guanciale and tomato.
And another thing you could do with this dish, if you didn't want to add eggs or you didn't have eggs, was you can just finish the pasta without it. And that is another Roman pasta called spaghetti alla Grecia.
Yeah.
That is just guanciale and pepper, and another one of my favorites. I guess I've said all of them are my favorites, but I love alla Grecia. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's everything we did minus the egg tonight, which I think we just got sidetracked and forgot to mention. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed your cooking, and everybody has a delicious meal tonight, and we hope to see you again. Good night.